So we're following this case very closely, as people are right across the country. And Jeff Marek is one of those people, Sportsnet insider, our longtime friend. He hosts the Jeff Marek Show and the 32 Thoughts podcast. He's in Toronto this morning. And Jeff, thanks a lot for coming back today.
Yeah, I wish we were under better circumstances, but nice to talk to you again, Heather.
You know, I wish so too. I mean, I know you were listening. You did a whole podcast in advance of that. Of the briefing yesterday. Just give me your sense overall how you're dealing with this as you talk about this issue, this case, what you're hearing from your listeners, how you're treating it.
And I think people are angry. I think people are disappointed. I think this is a story that gives people a lot of anxiety. I don't exclude myself from that as well. I find the case, like many Canadians do, disturbing and awful. And again, we'll see how this all plays out legally once all of the accusations are tested in court.
And did you hear? Did you get any feedback? Did you get any feedback directly at all after that news conference yesterday? Because we're a little shy on detail from that.
Sure. Yeah, very shy on detail. You know, we understand. You know, that this is before the courts, and, you know, I don't think that, you know, whether it was the police chief or the detective sergeant wanted to hand essentially an information protein shake to the defense and all of this. I think people have significant questions, and a lot of those were raised, and I heard a lot of them yesterday, and you point out as well, you know, why was this case started in 2018, closed in 2019, and then what led to it being open again in 2022? I think that's one that people have significant questions about. And, you know, was there interference along the way? We didn't get any of those answers yesterday. And I'll be honest with you, like I found that, you know, the press conference yesterday was about 45 minutes, and Chief Trong at one point, you know, pointed his finger at the media and says, you know, the way the women are portrayed in media and in magazines and pop culture and all that, you know, can lead to what we're discussing right now, which I think a lot of people from the feedback that I got really found distasteful and inappropriate. That time. It may very well be true, but it just seemed like it was a police chief that had his back against the wall, didn't like answering, you know, questions that he had to repeat the same "I can't give you an answer" to, and decided, unprovoked, Heather, just to start lashing out at the assembled media.
Especially since, as many see it, it's hockey culture, not just the 5 specific former players, a hockey culture which is on trial. Do you see it that way, that hockey itself is on trial here, Jeff?
I'll even blow that out a little bit more. Like, I think as a society we've failed women, and I think as a sport we've failed women as well. Like, I don't think that this is necessarily specific to hockey, but hockey's not any different at all. And I don't think hockey can wash its hands and just say, oh, this is a societal issue. This has nothing to do with us. I mean, this is how things change in the world. Everybody has their own little corner. You change yours, someone else changes theirs, and everybody progresses. So as much as it is a societal issue as well, hockey doesn't have its hands clean here. You know, this is a hockey now, and we've seen this in the past 10 years or so. A lot of these issues are now finally starting to see the light of day, and they're uncomfortable conversations. And there's there's a lot of difficult conversations along the way. There's a lot of situations that people would rather just sort of allow to exist in the shadows. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing, and I think it's one that we have to use to take a look at hockey and how players behave, and how junior teams behave, and how NHL teams behave. And I think we have a societal problem with how men treat women. Not all men, certainly, but I think we do have a significant problem here, and I don't think hockey can exclude itself from that.
So it was All-Star Weekend in Toronto, of course, and Gary Bettman, the league commissioner, was asked about this directly at his briefing on Friday of last week. How do you think the NHL is responding to the story where it is right now? Basically, I mean, he certainly criticized the actions, the allegations, but there's an internal investigation, not going to comment until the criminal proceedings are finished. What do you think of how the NHL is handling things right at this moment?
So there's a couple of different reports that are out there. There's the Hockey Canada report, which is under appeal right now. And there's also the NHL report based on their investigation as well, which Gary Bettman told us on Friday that took about 12 months. Now, from what I've been told, both parties, Hockey Canada and NHL, there was a concern, or there was a fear. I mean, they were both told, both parties were told that if you release your report, without a charge, that they could be put in a litigious position. I really do believe that the threat of a lawsuit, both towards Hockey Canada and also from the NHL, I think that kept those two reports from ever being released. And right now, both parties seem to be quite content to hand this over and leave this with the London police. I don't think that necessarily we'll ever see the NHL report. Right now, they can say, look, this is a legal matter. We're not going to release anything. We're not going to bias or prejudice this investigation now that it is a part of a legal proceeding. And I think Hockey Canada may be in a situation where they say the same, although I still think there are some significant questions that Hockey Canada still needs to answer.
You used, I think the phrase was special treatment. And I'm wondering, I think that's a bit of a public perception of it. Interesting, in the Globe, there's an op-ed piece from the organization called Can't Buy My Silence, which is opposed to non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. So a legal expert there saying what she thinks happened is police sent the victim back to Hockey Canada for that internal investigation, allowed Hockey Canada to take back the complaint and then, move it to the side with an NDA. And that kind of gets to the whole notion of exceptional treatment because the hockey players were involved, sort of a wink and a nudge here. How much of that is part of the discussion that you're hearing?
I think is a huge part of the discussion. And I think what we're, I don't want to see that the police were sort of setting up Hockey Canada to use them as a scapegoat for their closing of the case in 2019, only to reopen it again in 2022. But I was watching this yesterday and thinking to myself, one of the major mistakes that Hockey Canada made, Heather, through all of this is they didn't compel the athletes to cooperate with the London police. I think one of the things that we look back on now that Hockey Canada probably should have done was said to all of these players, if you don't cooperate with London police, you can no longer play for any Hockey Canada program, i.e. you can never compete internationally for your country, for Canada. They did not do that. So I think that is one of the questions here. Like, it does very much seem like this is, and this certainly was, protect the hive culture. And that is what hockey has always done. It's always, there's a certain element of hockey that's under assault. We need to surround, we need to protect, and I think that's probably what happened here as well. I know that's one of the main issues that people have with Hockey Canada. Did they do enough to get these players to go along with the London police, the initial London police investigation?
But just to be clear, do they not? They have that suspension in place, Jeff. Do they not, of all former players on that 2018 team from any playing or any involvement with Hockey Canada internationally now?
That is a really good point that you bring up, Heather, because you're right. There are 5 players that have been charged right now, but there was a full team that's been under suspension right now. And I think one of the players who many wonder about, this is, after, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, announced that the players are going back to the Olympics. One of the questions, Cale Makar, who's a defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche, one of the best players in the NHL, he technically is under international suspension as well, perhaps because of this. Does he miss the next round of the Olympics? We'll see where that one heads. But yes, you're right. Everyone from that team is under suspension. Hockey Canada has taken down the picture of the 2018 team as well. So we'll see where this one heads.
Let me ask you just quickly before I have to let you go, and I hope we have further conversations about this. But the chief talked a lot about having to regain trust in the community after the investigations and what has happened. What about regaining trust within the hockey community from the outside? Canadians, as they look at this story, how much work do you think there is still to do there in regaining and rebuilding trust?
I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be there. And I know that the chief came shy of giving any details. This is going to be a lengthy process. This is going to be a long time because of what we just talked about a couple of seconds ago. There's always been a belief that there has been special treatment specifically in this country for hockey players, that it is, protect the players, protect the teams. It's our national sport. Nothing can dent this. We don't want these, unsavory stories to see the light of day. I think this is going to be a lengthy process to build back this trust with Canadians, and not unlike what Hockey Canada is going through as well. And they still have a lot of work to do to build back trust with Canadians. I don't think this happens overnight. I don't think that yesterday's press conference went far enough to start to build back trust, either with the victim, either with the hockey community or Canadians in general. I think this is one that's going to take a long time. And Maybe we say the apology was the first step, but there were no details provided why everybody from the police services in London, everybody who was involved in the initial investigation, is no longer part of the investigation. There were no reasons given as to why that was a fact.
One of many unanswered questions. You're right. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate your perspective as always, and we will talk further about this. Jeff Marek from Toronto this morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather.